The way you circumvent this process is you've got to be active in your social media on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is still the most prominent tool. Love it or hate it, it is where people are talking about work. You can see the other there. I know there's podcasts that are out there like yours that are helping with that conversation, but we're all having this conversation. It's going to be that networking capability. It's about going to meetings and shaking hands with people. You can't do it all online. You can do some of it online, obviously, but that's why I'm part of the HR association here. We've helped a ton of people find their jobs in the last 2 years, not just on the HR side, but on the benefits side, on the recruiting side, on the payroll side. And in many cases, people are showing up there and they're looking for jobs in IT or other, and they're just coming to meet the person face to face. So it's got a bit of a guerrilla tactic feel to it. You've got to be out there and networking and talking with people and finding those connections.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the ATS system. If you're like me, you're pretty familiar with the ATS system. You've used it anytime you've applied online, especially to major companies. But when did it come about? Why did it come about? Why does it seem so difficult to match keywords and get into an interview? Today, we talk to Matt Thompson, the Chief Talent Officer of Thompson Search Group and the COO of a new company called Game Day AF. This conversation ran a little long, so I'm going to split it up into two. But in this first part, we talk about the origins of the ATS system, why it was brought about, what we can do to try to maximize our chances to get into the ATS system. And he even shows us a software that can help us tremendously. This is a great conversation, and the second part is just as good, so I encourage you to listen to the second part as well. But without further ado, here's my conversation with Matt Thompson. All right. Hi, Matt. It's really good to see you. So I got to see you. Let's see, I first met you, I think about 5 years ago. I was going through another job search. And at the time, I had just coming off some marketing stuff, and you were working with Heartland, which is a local company here in Oklahoma City. And you were trying to help me get in the door there. And that's when I first met you. And then with this new adventure, we got to reconnect. And then as we got to talking, I thought, oh my gosh, you're perfect to talk about a lot of these topics that I know a lot of people are talking about. So why don't we go ahead and have you just kind of give a little bit about your background, all the things that you've done. I know it's vast, but that kind of give an idea of where you're coming from.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that, and thanks for having me on. My name is Matt Thompson, and I've been a professional recruiter since 1997. Came right out of a very long Tommy Boy undergrad run, and ended up driving from my school in Missouri. I went to Missouri State and was driving to go bartend in California and do triathlon when my Jeep broke down in Oklahoma, and lived with my sister for about a month before she told me, look, you went to college for half your life. Could you go get a job? And so I ended up finding a job as a restaurant recruiter where I had bartended and worked in the restaurant business for a few years, and got hired within a week. To be a restaurant recruiter, recruiting for companies like Panera Bread, Texas Roadhouse. In fact, which I opened all the Panera Breads in Texas Roadhouse in 3 states, including Oklahoma. I actually had worked for some of those people in college. And that's how I got into the recruiting game. And in that part, I was a third party recruiter, and I was paid a fee to go find people and basically steal them from one company and take them to another company. And that's exactly how the third party penhunting world works. From that evolved into me opening my own business called Oklahoma Solutions, and I did contract work for companies like Mecklenburg Duncan, now ND Building Products, Devon Energy, Chesapeake Energy, back when they were all starting. And we did direct hire, technology and accounting and all these different roles in what's called a direct hire platform, where they pay us a fee if we find somebody for them. Or we would do contract labor, where we would do contract to hire after 30, 60, 90 days. They could be administrative roles, technology roles, customer support, whatever that is. Did that for a few years. Then I started getting recruited I sold that business in 2001, ironically, if everybody remembers the dates. There's a reason why. So in early 2002, we sold that business, and I went on my own for about 2 years, working with those companies. And then my corporate clients started asking me to come and build a talent acquisition recruiting team for them because it became prominent back in 2002 and three. And then I started my first corporate job with a company called Love's Travel Stops, and a lot of people in Oklahoma know that brand. But they're one of the biggest brands out there, and two of the richest people in the country, Tom and Judy Love, who just passed over the last year, ran that business. And so I ran the recruiting function for a few years, then the overall HR function. Then left that company, did that for Whataburger, did it for Sonic for a very short, miserable time, and then went back out on my own. Went to OGE for a very short time, about 2 years, which was really fun, and then went back on my own in 2012, and I've been doing that ever since. So for the last 13 years, I've owned TSG, and I do recruiting, headhunting work, retained search, but they also do HR technology projects for those companies and employment branding merchandising projects for those companies. I think I got that into 3 minutes, 4 minutes. So I hope that was good.
That was nice. You've been practicing that elevator pitch.
Yeah, in the mirror all night last night. It was
That's
really helpful.
it was nice. It was nice. So one of the things when we first talked a couple weeks ago, one of the things that really piqued my ears up when we first started talking was you mentioned that you were a part of helping some of these bigger companies like Devon and some others design their ATS system. So, as we say ATS, just for everybody else, because I'd been saying it wrong for a long time. ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System, and is the mechanism that when you apply to a lot of especially big companies, it's going into an applicant tracking system uh, for them. So when you said that you would help design that, I thought, oh, perfect, because that's a system that's kind of a blue lagoon of what is this? What does it even do? How do I help get past this and all of that? So you had mentioned when we were talking just a little bit ago about the history of it. So I thought it would be a good thing to start of how did the applicant tracking system evolve? Where did it come from, and those kind of things.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, applicant tracking system, and the word is exactly what it's meant to be. It was the automation of the administrative function of tracking a candidate from when we post a job and they apply, all the way through to whether we move forward and offer them a position, to whether we reject them and move them on, or um, just tracking that process as far as it goes. Now, I started building systems like this back in 97, 98, because when I started in the business, I literally was given two stacks of paper to call people on a phone, a hardline phone, folks. I know that's not this. That's not this. It's where you pick it up and you dial a number and you have a headset on. This is old school, 97. They were digital, though, they weren't analog. So I would call people and I would have them in on pieces of paper and in file cabinets, and it was crazy. But that was the world at that time. That was early internet years. This is well before what we see today. But luckily, systems called CRMs, or customer record management systems, became a tool to automate that and put that into an actual system, some kind of PC. And in some cases, the early onset of the BlackBerry, which I'm going to bring out another old tool, but that's part of it.
Love
And
the
so
BlackBerry.
I was able to get a system called Act Database, which was one of the first big, commercially available tools, and start entering data in and creating fields to enter my people in, and then track what I'm doing with them with a notes section. And I could message them. The emails were starting to become prominent. So we were emailing candidates and emailing those candidates to our customers or our clients. And that's where the systems really began. Now, at the same time, we had a site called headhunter.net, which eventually became a company called Career Builder, which a lot of people know about. But that's how it originally started, headhunter.net. And then there was actually a site called Rolodex.com. And it was the first real web based CRM records, person management system where you could put their name, their address, their business, all the information you wanted. So all of those tools became part of our tool set from a recruiting perspective or a sales perspective, not just recruiting. And that's where we started building it. Now, in 2000 to 2001 and 2, Monster came out. It was called Monster Board at first, for those who want real history, and then became monster.com. And that's where they had that system built in where people would post a job and apply. And then behind the scenes, there would be a database that recruiters like I could buy a subscription to. And everybody knows where this is going to, because we're going to bring up LinkedIn here in a second. Because we brought up Rolodex. So we would have this monster.com login and we would post our jobs there and manage our candidates there. So we had those systems come in, and this is now, I'm jumped from 97 to the early 2000s. And then we started having a company called LinkedIn pop up. So early 2000s, LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman and that group brought in the LinkedIn tool, and it was that basic Rolodex.com, but with a picture. Mm-hmm. And at that time, nobody cared about that. That wasn't a part of our daily conversation. It was actually very cool to have a profile of a picture. And this is when MySpace is coming out, and a lot of these tools are coming out. I know I'm bringing up tools that half the listeners are going to be like, they're going to have to Google this and figure out what half this stuff is. But we had those tools came about. So LinkedIn became a tool, and then everybody wanted their own LinkedIn. Now, part of our process, is that a good history breakdown for that moment?
For sure.
Because the tie-in beyond that is that eventually you have to get them into a payroll system. Because, we go through this process of posting and interviewing and hiring, and then we have to get these people paid and on the benefits program, which is the biggest part of the onboarding process for any new hire. So we built those tools, and we had all this flow coming in. We had a place to put them, but then we had to keep it separate. That database was a separate system to the HRIS system. So then you had to create a whole new process of sending them an email and log in here or fill out your paperwork, and then we're going to enter that data in. And so from an HR perspective and just a process improvement perspective, everybody wanted that automated. So we had these systems that were external: Monster, Career, eventually ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, all these different tools that were out there. Dice is a good technology job board that still exists. But we had those people over here, and we had to get them over here. So what people started doing around 2003, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and there's a lot of great technology. Josh Burson, all my HR friends out there are going to know Josh Burson. He started analyzing all the different tools that were out there, and the technology companies that were building payroll systems and benefits, Paycom being one of them. Everybody knows Chad. Chad was selling to us in 98 for our staffing company. Chad and some other businesses like Paycom realized that they needed to build an applicant tracking tool inside of their system so it would speak to each other. So we didn't have to do all these crazy secure integrations with other tools. And that was the mindset of the day, is like one platform, you enter stuff here and it follows it all the way through the system, which is not uncommon today either. So that's when the payroll and benefits companies started saying, oh, let's go buy this ATS group that's out there, these little mini ATS systems. They started popping up all over the place. And LinkedIn started selling the idea that you could buy our tool and then integrate with yours. And that's when all that started. So all these tools started having to speak to each other to be viable. Otherwise, we had a login for this, then we had a login for this, and we were creating more work at that point. So in the mid 2000s, all these tools came out, like HR Smart. We had a company called SuccessFactors pop up, which is very popular now in the SAP segment. In fact, SAP bought that company to integrate with their system. And that's what started happening. We started seeing this build out of tools where you had the ATS, and then we had an onboarding module, which I built with developers at Love's back in the day because they wouldn't let me buy one. And then it would speak to the HRIS system, which eventually would speak to the true enterprise system of the company. And it would create logins for you if you work in supply chain or accounting or whatever division. So that's how that kind of evolved. Now, that's when everybody started becoming integrated tools. In the last 10 years, and that lasted for about 8 years. So it's probably 2014, 15. And then people started realizing we're hamstrung, we're held hostage by this. We can only, if I buy Paycom, I have to buy all their other stuff or I can't use anything else. But their ATS stinks. Companies started integrating behavioral testing models with their systems. And that usually happens in the early part of the process. The applicant applies and then they get a behavioral test or some kind of mathematical test or some kind of testing environment. and then they move forward through there. And if your company didn't have that tool and they wouldn't let you integrate a tool with them, what were you going to do? You couldn't use that tool. So now over the last 8 years, and especially in the last four, and I just told you I built that big system with a global company, 20 countries, 7 languages, that tool could speak. All those tools played nice with each other. So what we've eventually evolved into is that, companies will buy disparate systems and integrate them together as long as, and everybody plays nice with each other now. They have to do it. The biggest onset being in the last 3 years, where everybody's adding AI ML tools inside of those systems to help further automate and speed up the process. So I can stop there for a second. I'm sure you have some questions beyond that, as we talked about that earlier, but go ahead.
Yeah, and I think this is probably where you're getting to is when you start looking at actually applying to a job, especially let's talk about to the big companies, because I know that's where you see it the most. There's a lot of smaller companies that you can apply online on LinkedIn, but then you can also go to their company website and things like that. But
Right.
the bigger companies, I remember when I first tried to apply to Chesapeake, this would have been back in 2013, something like that. That's the first time I had really experienced the online thing where you put your resume in, then you got to fill out all that information, which I know is a big frustration for candidates because you just sent them your resume and then you've got to put all that resume information into the system again and then send it. But where does that start to come in as far as when I know so like let's say you go to Devon, I think they use Workday now, which is very similar. For anybody who didn't catch, Paycom is a they're located here in Oklahoma City. They're a huge company here in Oklahoma City, do payroll and HR stuff and ATS stuff. So if you don't know who that is, they're very similar to Workday and other people. But so when you go in and you start putting that in, the big talk now is keywords. That's what everyone is always worried about is what are the keywords in your resume, and that's what feels like it becomes a rejection system of you didn't
Right.
have the proper word. So how does that all integrate into what you were just describing?
So that's perfect. So the original ATS systems were definitely that. So you'd have a job description that would be attached to a job opening. And that keyword relevance, if your resume matched that keyword relevance in the system, that's how the older systems would work. It would immediately rank you, so you could game the system. And I won't stress you can't do that today. Um, you could easily match the keywords of the job description, put them in your resume. Hopefully, it's truthful. I mean, obviously, you don't want to be misleading, but it would help rank you on that page one. So just like when you do a Google search, and anybody watching knows they don't get to page three in a Google search.
Mhm.
Anybody who goes to page three, they've already researched twice. They've already changed their search query to match up and give them a one-page result. That's how recruiters are working a lot, especially now when you're getting 1,000 applicants in less than hours, just hours for a position. So that's how that system works. Now, when you add AI/ML, the system gets a little bit smarter, and it works very much like the Google algorithms, Panda and Penguin, where it tries to find true relevance and it tries to see between the lines of the misleading. I'm just copying the job description and putting it in my resume so it'll rank me and then I'll get a call.
Mm.
You've got to have some actual meat to it. The tool I just built, Beamery, which is probably the biggest CRM for recruiting system that exists today. There's another one called Phenom, another one called Avature, and a few others. Hire Easy is another one. That's the one I almost turned on for Zoom last year, until they laid off everybody and then didn't hire anybody, sadly. Um, those are four of the top recruiting CRMs. They can all integrate with Workday or SAP or not a Paycom, because Paycom won't do it. That's the problem. But they use more intuitive AI ML logic to help you use your database as you fill in candidates and get the database filled up. In the case of global payments, where I just worked, I had 50, 60,000 people in it. So that was a big part of that system. But it uses the AI ML logic that you enter in. So you enter in some keywords, and then it starts finding other keywords that are relevant using AI and looking for those inside people's profiles to help rank them. So
Mm.
there is a bit. better logic to it. But I hope that addresses it. It's probably very relevant for people looking for a job today because they know they can match keywords, but they also have to realize the systems are smarter now and will filter out if the logic of your context of your resume makes sense for the job.
Yeah. Well, and it's such a weird dynamic because I used to have I had a friend who got so frustrated with the system. This is a few years ago. Got so frustrated with the system that he tried something once and he just took the job description, put it at the very end of his resume, put it all in white, and
White.
just sent in his resume that way. And he
Yeah.
got through he got to the first round that way. And he hadn't been getting in the first round for a long time. Now, obviously, AI now catches that. And if you have blank pages at the end of your resume, that's going to be pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But I also had a friend who applied for a big company and got rejected pretty much immediately. It was a job that this person had done for many years and was a perfect candidate for it. Got rejected pretty quickly through the ATS system. And through happenstance of using recruiters to bring them in, turned out she was perfect for the job and got offered once she got in front of the hiring manager, got offered within a day or so.
Yeah.
I would have never been able to do that had it not been through happenstance with a recruiter coming in for a different position, blah, blah, blah. So the ATS system took a perfect candidate of what they were looking for and rejected them so quickly. So is there, I guess when I think of the way, because this is mostly geared towards candidates, what can you do? Because I know that there's a lot of tools, Chat GPT, there's other tools out there where you can look at the job description and try to tailor your resume. That's the big buzzwords all the time. Tailor your resume for each job application, spend the time. I mean, what can a candidate do now to really try to get in that system? Because it just, again, it feels like just a huge gatekeeper
Yeah.
that it feels like you're sending it to nothing.
Well,
You
and you mentioned earlier, it's a rejection system, and that's what they've over the last 18 to 24 months. That's exactly what you're seeing on all the LinkedIn posts every day. I mean, we see them constantly throughout the day. People with the open to work banner saying, "I just got rejected in 2 minutes from
Mhm.
a job that I have done for another company and a competitor." I mean, and that's as a headhunter, I'm looking for the person who did that job at the competitor. And when you have somebody who applies like that, and they're not getting put through, they're getting ready to call me and spend 30, 40 grand because our fees aren't cheap for retained search. Usually it's much more specialized and not for this purpose.
Mhm.
But that's what you're seeing happen out there is candidates are applying for jobs. They do the right tools. The best thing about automation today is that there are tools like I've mentioned, Teal, that we can hopefully talk about, where it automates the tailoring of your resume so you can do it faster. I'm not taking away from my resume writer friends out there, but they also know it's been really hitting them because that's where they've made a lot of money in the last couple of years is tailoring a resume for this person for every job when you don't really, you should be able to automate that and do that. So one, I want to make sure that people know there are tools out there, not and many of them are paid tools, but they're like $20. I mean, it's so inexpensive. But on the other side, the way you circumvent this process is you've got to be active in your social media on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is still the most prominent tool. Love it or hate it, it is where people are talking about work. You can see the other I know there's podcasts that are out there like yours that are helping with that conversation, but we're all having this conversation. It's going to be that networking capability. It's about going to meetings and shaking hands with people. You can't do it all online. You can do some of it online, obviously, but that's why I'm part of the HR association here. We've helped a ton of people find their jobs in the last 2 years, not just on the HR side, but on the benefits side, on the recruiting side, on the payroll side, and in many cases, people are showing up there and they're looking for jobs in IT or other, and they're just coming to meet the person face to face. So it's got a bit of a guerrilla tactic feel to it. You've got to be out there and networking and talking with people and finding those connections. People, I told you about the gentleman I coached the other day. This is a mid 200s level base salary person in manufacturing, very specialized in a marketing role, but could do it for any manufacturing company. And then he got relocated here. Now he's, out of nowhere, he's not here. He's not, doesn't have a job. And now he's looking nationwide again. And he can look at any manufacturing company, but if he doesn't have the contacts, he's going to get put through an ATS system in most cases. Now, if he works with a firm like me, we do hand off right to the hiring manager. That's one way to do it. But we haven't seen that pop yet. We're hoping to see this year in job growth. But I'm hoping I'm addressing some of that. A lot of it is about that networking piece and being relevant on LinkedIn and posting. And there's a couple of things you do. You post about something, you share a post and comment on it, you comment on somebody else's post. Those three things alone get you recognized and opens up your connection chain on LinkedIn. I coached a young man who's very specialized nuclear engineering in the healthcare industry. So this is for a friend of mine whose son, his wife's in a special program in Grand Forks, not Grand Forks, North Dakota. Where's Mount Rushmore? In South Dakota. So that's where his wife has to do her training. He has to work there. There aren't a lot of jobs there for him. He's very specialized in the scientific medical field. So he's having to look at jobs, but his LinkedIn profile was nil. He didn't have a picture. He barely had his information and where he went to school on there. He had none of his certifications, those are basic 101 type things to do. But even then, that's not enough. You can be found that way, but if you're not sharing on LinkedIn and doing some things that are on the side, like you were talking about, where you literally had to circumvent an ATS system. The only way you do that is talking to humans.
Mm-hmm.
I'll stop there for a second because I'm sure I can see your brain percolating on that. But just talking to a human being, and I was joking about hardline phones, but yeah, sometimes you're going to have to be a little bold and get out there and introduce yourself. And not everybody's going to accept your introduction. Be prepared for that. It's no different than a rejection you might be feeling in job applications right now, but it's going to open some doors that you would not have had before.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that. And there's a lot of people that are starting things that you may not have never thought of or thought that you would be good at. But if you have a conversation with them, you kind of tell them what all you've done, then they can see value in you and your charisma and how you present yourself, which is also an important part that I hope to talk about at some point of like keeping yourself in a good spot so that you are presenting yourself in a good spot.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about teal because I do want to talk about that. I've seen things where people post that they're getting dinged, that systems now are starting to see that they have used AI to tailor their resume and are getting dinged for that now, which is kind of ironic since they're using AI to sort them out. But
Yeah.
then when a candidate uses AI, they're getting rejected because they're seeing that they used it to try to get into the system. So let's talk about Teal a little bit, what it does, and what do you think is happening there? Is it laziness that maybe there's some things that they had to go in and revise themselves because the AI wouldn't know that, like dates or something, and maybe they put a placeholder and they just didn't even catch that? But what do you think is going on there, and how does Teal help these companies or these candidates get to the companies?
That's such a good point, right? Because people that are really heavy in the job search right now, they've got this database of resumes they've used, right? So
Mhm.
they tried to tailor this one for this one for this company, and job title and maybe job description. And so that's where tools like Teal and others have come into play. Now, Teal being the most prominent and first, they were probably the first one that me and all my LinkedIn recruiter friends, excuse me, found. And I talk about them a lot to the young people in Oklahoma City. I'm part of leadership of Oklahoma City. I present to the YLX level. I'm the chair of that board, and we talk to kids, some of the top students from our 59 schools in our district, 59 districts in our Oklahoma City metro. And I show them this tool a lot the last 3 years because they're getting ready to go into the job market. They're going to be looking for internship roles. Now, a lot of them need to use their schools for that, but for the adults in the room, the people that are in their 30s and 40s that have maybe changed jobs twice, because the generational gap of that is different. Anybody younger than that, they're changing every 2 to 3 years. So anybody 32, 33 and younger, they're like, oh, we change jobs all the time. But somebody in my age range, 54, 55, we're like, a lot of them have had their jobs like twice. They've had two jobs. So the teal tool is, and I'll bring it up real quick. I think this share function should work fine. Share screen, and we'll go here and here. Is that showing up okay for you, Brad?
Yeah.
Perfect. So this tool right here, it's the biggest thing that came out in the first 2 years of it with this job application tracker. And what that tool does is allow you to put a plugin, a Chrome plugin, which I have mine right up here in the top right, and it puts a plugin into your system. So you can have, every time you apply to a job, whether it's through LinkedIn or any other tool, the Teal plugin opens up and immediately tracks that you applied for that job. It time, date, and stamps it. It puts what job title you applied to. So you can go back and revisit and follow up and check in. That's probably one of the hardest things we're seeing. One of the harder things is tracking where you've already applied. And, people are getting their rejection emails or they're getting a contact, and they have to organize that, because otherwise you might respond incorrectly to somebody that from one company when you think you're applying, it was a response from another company. So job trackers are really, really helpful. There's obviously this AI resume builder and checker. You just talked about proofing it.
Mm-hmm.
These AI tools are great for building, but you do have to check, like you talked about, did they, it works very much like the parser. We didn't talk about that earlier. I'm going to go back to that in a little bit. But the resume builder will take the job description using the plugin of the job you're applying on and help start tailoring a resume like this. So you can start rebuilding your resume to apply to that job. And then it has its own checker to generate that. It has a cover letter generator, which cover letters, I'll be honest, and I tell people this all the time and they hate hearing it, but I have never opened those. Inside an ATS system, you can attach two things, and you've all seen this, where you can attach a cover letter and you can attach a resume. I can tell you that our recruiters in the planet right now, on the planet, everywhere, do not have time to open a cover letter. And if they don't, the hiring managers don't, because the hiring managers are looking for a short list. And it's very rare that I haven't asked for a cover letter from anybody, even my clients, for years. So, from an internal perspective, while this is helpful, and if it requires the step, then you have to do the step. I'm not saying don't do it if it becomes a required field in the ATS or applicant tracking system. But if it's not required, I don't know if that extra step means anything more than they'll see the attachment and they'll move on. I'm just going to be honest. I hope that's okay to share, but that's the reality of what most HR professionals would tell you today. It's got the summary generator. It's got the resume job description match. We talked about the keyword relevance piece. And so in those ATS systems, they do have scoring mechanisms where they'll say red, yellow, green based on relevance, of keyword relevance to the job. This tool can do all of that. I don't want to over talk this part, resume bullet point generator, but it gives you your bullet categories so you can break down your resume. So if you have one job, but you've had 3 titles at that job, you can break that up. Or if you've got multiple jobs, you can break that up. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Some people have been at one job for 10, 15 years and they've changed titles 2 or 3 times. So it's good to subset that on your resume. And most resume coaches will tell you this as well, because there are different job descriptions you do inside each of that. And it shows depth, it shows promotability, it shows a lot of other things to a hiring manager. But this is why this tool, I think, is significant. I'll stop sharing there just because I'm sure you might have some questions beyond that. But there are a few tools like that. I like David because I reached out to David the week he posted about it, and he connected with me, and he's been giving me great advice to give to our young people. And he shares a lot of data on LinkedIn about what he's seeing in the candidates that are using his tool, because they have the data behind it. They can show that these IT professionals have applied to hundreds of jobs and have not been hired yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting data, right? When we talk about the funnel and how long it takes somebody to get a job right now, it's very different than it was 4 years ago.
Okay, I think this is a great place to pause my conversation with Matt. I want to thank Matt for being willing to come on, for being so candid, and for showing us that software that can help us when we apply to new jobs. The insights he provides about networking and how important that still is and getting out in front of people is invaluable. And I hope you take that to heart. And I encourage you to come back for the second part because we get more in depth, talk about more issues, and it's a great end to the conversation. I hope you are enjoying this podcast. If you've listened to any of these, thank you. And if you do enjoy it and you know someone who's going through a job search, please share this podcast with them. Please like it. Please subscribe it if you're on YouTube so that we can get in front of as many people as possible. But with that, I'll go ahead and leave you for this evening. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.